Today, I'm going to be setting up this quadcopter, the Flywoo Explorer LR. And this is the new version of the Explorer LR with the DJI O3 Air unit in it. So that means I'm going to be binding it to my DJI goggles too, and it's got an Express ELRS receiver in it, so I'm going to be binding it to my Radiomaster Boxer. And this is all stuff that I've covered how to do in previous videos, but my policy is, as long as I'm doing something, make a video out of it. And there are always little nuances that are specific to this particular setup or this particular moment in time. Come along with me. I'm Joshua Bardwell. You're going to learn something today. And I think the place I'd like to start is with setting up and binding the video transmitter. Thankfully, with the DJI O3 Air unit, we can update the firmware without ever plugging in a battery. We're going to need to plug in a battery to bind it and test out video transmission, but firmware updates can be done simply by plugging in USB. So we don't need to worry about it overheating and so forth, which is sometimes an issue. So I'm going to plug in USB to the O3 Air unit. And I'm going to start up the DJI Assistant 2 Consumer Drones Series app. If you need to download that for some reason, then I'll put a link in the video description. And we'll just click on the O3 Air unit and see what firmware Flywoo have shipped it. Oh yeah, no, it's got a super old firmware on it. We're going to go ahead and update it to the latest. Alrighty, now that the Air unit is updated, I'm going to go ahead and update the firmware on my goggles too. Just because it's been a while since I've done it, and I just want to make sure they're on the latest. Now's a good time to check. Good, we are on the latest. Fantastic. And then the next thing to do is going to be to bind the goggles. I'm not going to get a fan out because this shouldn't take very long, but if you're going to have your Air unit powered on the bench for very long, it's a good idea to get a little fan and blow the fan on. It doesn't take very much airflow to keep it from overheating. But if it overheats, it'll just shut itself down for safety, and that'll be annoying. On the Air unit, the bind button is just below the status LED. We'll just press that, and it'll begin blinking. And then on the goggles, we will press the bind button, which on the goggles the goggles 2, it's right here in between the eyepieces. And I think on the goggles Integra, you hold down the power button. I'm 100% sure about that. Why would you not ship it on 4.4? You shipped it on 4.4. It has better return to home, better GPS rescue, including auto landing, which 4.3 doesn't have. And 4.4 has high definition OSD support for the O3 Air unit specifically. Why would you ship your special GPS oriented quad with the new O3 Air unit and not ship it with 4.4? Except if I've been sitting on this for so damn long. He shipped it to me. Okay, January 19th. When did Beta Flight come out? It came out January 28th. Okay, so it wasn't out when they sent it to me. I got this at the end of January, and I haven't looked at it yet because I'm a terrible reviewer. I'm the worst. Do they have a Beta Flight 4 release for it now? LR4 HD DJI O3 Air unit. Turn on core only. Oh. Okay. We're going to do it. We're going to update this SOB to 4.4.0, and this video isn't going to be pointless like it was about to be. My laziness is finally going to come in useful. Because if I had got this quad today, they probably would have shipped it with, they wouldn't have shipped it with 4.4.0 on it. First thing we need to do is go into Betaflight, go to the presets tab, and save backup. This will save a backup of the current configuration of the board. Always do this before you update firmware. I'm just going to name it Flywoo O3 HD Betaflight 4.3.1 before updating to 4.4. I don't know, name it whatever you want, but that's going to help us be sure if we screw all this up, we can go back to something that works. Next, we'll go into Betaflight Configurator. And what they say to do, and this is weird, Explorer LR4 HD DJI O3. That is this quad. Turn on the core only option. That's very unusual, but this is a time when that would be something to do. I'm going to go to the firmware flasher tab. We're going to auto detect the Flywoo F405. Now they said to flash 4.4.0. 4.4.1 has come out, but this is a weird situation. I think I'm going to flash 4.4.0 exactly. We're going to enable core only. We're going to load firmware, and we're going to flash it. And while that's flashing, we're going to go down here. I'm going to pick the correct CLI settings. I have an Express ELRS receiver, so I'm going to pick this one. You would pick whichever one based on the receiver that you have. And then I'm going to press Control A to select all and right-click Copy. The flash has finished. I'm going to hit Connect. I'm going to apply custom defaults because I think you always do that. And then we're going to go to the CLI and we are going to right-click Paste and hit Enter. Alrighty, well, we had a couple of little red lines in there that were errors, but let's take a look at the configuration and see if it makes sense. And the very first thing I want to do is just check that the gyro and accelerometer are lit up. That's a good sign. If they're not, then something that we may have flashed the flight controller wrong, or we might have the wrong setup information. The barometer is lit up. If I plug in the battery, hopefully the GPS will also light up. We'll come back to that in a second. Let's go to the configuration tab. GPS is enabled. Oh, GPS is lit up. Fantastic. It looks like, we have some basic sanity checks that things are working as they should. The reason that I started going this direction is that Betaflight 4.4 supports high definition OSD. It looks like they do not have that enabled. Maybe because this only just got added to the DJI O3, but we definitely want to enable it. My God, this OSD is a freaking mess. Wow. It's like here, I'm going to look out through this tiny hole in all this OSD information. We can make that better though, and I'm going to show you how. So looking at the OSD in the goggles, we can see that it pretty much matches what we see here in the OSD tab of Betaflight. And the problem with that is that the OSD tab of Betaflight currently is set up for standard definition cameras, old analog cameras. And what that means is that in the goggles, our OSD is in the center of the screen only because standard definition is 4:3 aspect ratio, not widescreen. But Betaflight and the O3 system now support high definition canvas, and we're definitely going to want to enable that, if only because it'll let us push all this nonsense to the sides and let us see more of the screen. The first thing we're going to do to make that work is to change from video format auto to video format HD. And I'm going to do that, and we can see this makes a change in the Betaflight configurator immediately. We're going to go ahead and save that. There's another step we're going to need to do in the goggles to get it to actually work. In the goggles, I'm going to go into the menu and go to Settings and go to Display. And there I'm going to go down to Canvas mode and change that from normal to HD. And now what I see in the goggles is the same as what I see on the display, but instead of the standard definition where it's all clustered in the center, now it is, first of all, smaller letters, so I can just have more detail, and I can move it all over the screen. So if I do want to keep all this information, I can drag it like so, and I'll need to kind of look. It'll update in real time while I'm doing it. Just look in the goggles to make sure you're not overlapping some existing piece of OSD information like the record timer on my screen. But we can drag all this stuff around to put it wherever we want it. Now personally, this is how I like to set mine up. And if you want to set yours up exactly like mine, I actually have a CLI dump that I just copy and paste. I'm working on a preset that'll go in the Betaflight presets tab, but it's not ready yet. But I'll put the link to this CLI dump down in the video description below, and you can grab it if you want to copy my OSD layout. Of course, you can drag everything any way that you want it. Do notice that this layout doesn't have GPS in it though, because most of my quads don't have GPS. So I'm definitely going to want to add that. Oh yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. I'll take it. I'll take it. That's a good setup. Go ahead and save that. My OSD is ready to go on my Betaflight 4.4 upgrade. That was surprisingly painless. Next, we're going to bind the receiver. And the good news is that with this flight controller, the receiver does power up when USB is plugged in. So we don't need to have a battery plugged in and a fan running to keep the air unit from overheating. I can see that this little blinking LED, not this one over here, but this one over here is the Express ELRS receiver. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug in and wait for that to go from a slow blinking to a fast blinking. And the fast blinking will mean that the receiver has activated its Wi-Fi hotspot mode. There we go, fast blinking. The next thing I'm going to do is open up my computer's Wi-Fi configuration, and I'm going to look for the Express ELRS RX Wi-Fi network. And I'm going to connect to that. The password for that is all lowercase express LRS. I've put that in before, so I'm not going to need to put it in. After that, your computer may automatically open a web page and go to the page I'm about to show you, but sometimes that doesn't work, and you have to manually open a browser and go to 10.0.0.1. And you should get a page like this. Welcome to your Express LRS update page. And what we're going to want to see is that this receiver has Express LRS 3.x on it, any 3. whatever version, and it doesn't. It's got firmware 2.2.0. So we're going to want to update the firmware on the receiver. Firmware 2.x can't bind to firmware 3.x, and of course I've got the latest on my controller, and in general you just want to be on the latest version, or at least the latest major release. In order to update it, we're going to need Express LRS Configurator. Now we're starting to dip our toes into the world of Express LRS, and that's a pretty deep pool. I've got an Express LRS Getting Started guide video. I'll link it in the video description. But the short version is we're going to get Express LRS Configurator. We are going to choose the latest version of the firmware. This is, what receiver is this? This is, oh, great. It's a DIY. That's so... The problem is that some of manufacturers ship their receivers with a generic firmware on it, and then you don't know what the correct firmware to flash is. So we could just flash the DIY firmware. Let's see here. We could just choose DIY 2.4 gigahertz and choose the matching firmware, DIY RX ESP8285, DIY RX ESP86. So we could just choose this one, and you'll never go wrong choosing the matching firmware if it exists. ESP8285 XX1280. That's the firmware that's on there. That's what we're going to flash. And we're going to go and we're going to put in our configuration options, including the binding phrase. With Express LRS, it can be bound the traditional way by pushing a button, but the more common way to do it is to put a binding phrase into the receiver. The binding phrase is kind of like a Wi-Fi network name. It's a bad analogy, but it's okay. It'll do. You're going to pick a binding phrase. You're going to put it in all your receivers and all your radios, and they'll all be bound together magically. This is my binding phrase. I'm not going to show you what it is. And the other settings here, we're just going to leave it the defaults, and we're not going to build and flash. We're just going to build. By the way, this is working for me right now because my computer has both a wired LAN connection to the internet and a wireless connection. If you have only a wireless connection, then if you are connected to the Express LRS Wi-Fi network, the hotspot, you won't have internet access and you won't be able to download the files necessary to compile Express LRS Configurator. So if you have only a single wireless connection, you will need to connect back to your home Wi-Fi network, compile the firmware, then connect back to the Express LRS hotspot, and upload the firmware. Once the compile is done, a new window will pop up with the folder containing the compiled firmware.bin file. We're just going to take that and I'm just going to copy it or move it to my desktop so I can find it easily for the next step. Then I will connect back to the Express LRS RX hotspot network and go back to my web browser and go to 10.0.0.1, and we'll scroll down and we will choose that file for firmware update. So I'll go to the desktop. There's my firmware.bin that I just created. We're going to select that file and click Update. Once that's done, we can repeat that process, but this time the receiver should be on Express LRS 3.0 or 3. Whatever I just flashed. I will wait for the receiver to start fast flashing, indicating it is in hotspot mode. Then I will join the Express LRS RX Wi-Fi network. And now the screen looks a little different because we are on firmware 3.2.1. Fantastic. There's really nothing to change here because we've done everything we need to do, but sometimes flashing an Express LRS receiver does not set the bind phrase correctly. There's a technical reason for this that isn't important to go into. Sometimes you will want to go into the Wi-Fi hotspot page and manually type your bind phrase and then save and reboot. If you find that flashing, and frankly, if it's already on the right firmware version, then there's no reason to flash it. You can just type it in here and hit save and reboot. Now that I've done that, I should be able to get it to bind to my radio because my radio already has the bind phrase in it. So I'm going to unplug USB to power the receiver down and take it out of Wi-Fi mode. I'm going to power up my radio. My radio is now waiting. And if I plug in USB to power up the receiver, it should connect. This light should go solid and we should be good to go. There we go. Bing, it's linked. Now at this point, there are other Express related settings that we could change. And once again, I'm going to show you the settings that I'm changing for the sake of completeness. But if you want more detailed information, like for example, how did I get the bind phrase into my radio? Or what's this Express LRS Lua script that I'm going to run? Now again, I got to refer you to my Express LRS Definitive Getting Started Guide and my Express LRS 3.0 release video. Those things will bring you up to speed on everything there is to know about Express LRS. One thing I want to do is change the packet rate from 250 hertz down to 50 hertz. And the reason for this is that lower packet rates have better range, higher packet rates have lower latency. But for a sort of 4-inch cruiser long distance quad like this, I think range is going to be more important. And the O3 Air unit can get pretty far out. So we're going to knock that down. I also want to make sure that my switch mode is set to wide, not hybrid. That's a change I make on all of them, and I'm going to recommend that you do the same. Finally, you're going to want to have your telemetry ratio set to standard. You can find that there are various ratios you can set here, but if you just set your telemetry ratio to standard, the system will automatically select a correct, appropriate telemetry ratio, and you don't need to worry about that setting. Those are the basic settings that I would do for any new Express LRS quad I was setting up. 50 hertz for long range, 250 hertz for freestyle, and maybe higher for racing. I don't know. Yeah, we should be good to go though. Next, we're going to go into Betaflight Configurator and see that the receiver is working correctly and the flight controller is configured correctly for the way that my receiver is set up. And the first thing I'm going to want to do is just move my sticks and make sure that my channel map is correct. So the throttle moves the throttle channel, yaw moves the yaw channel, pitch, and roll, and it does. If yours does not work correctly, then you can come here to the channel map and you can rearrange the AETR. You literally just type delete and type different letters, and it will change the order that the channels go and remap them so that they are correct. In my case, they're already correct, so I don't need to do that. Another thing I want to check is the endpoints for the channels, that they should go from 1000 to 2000. 1000 to 2000 on all 4 of the main sticks. If yours do not, I've got a video where I show how to set that up. I'll link it in the video description. If yours are pretty close, like they might go like 1993 to 2012 or something, yeah, it's close enough. But if you really want to be a perfectionist, you'll set them to 1000 and 2000. I have no idea why telemetry is disabled here. You totally want it. There's no downside to having it. Even if you don't use it, it might come in handy. We definitely should have that turned on. And Flywoo should definitely ship this turned on. I don't see why they wouldn't. That's kind of weird. Okay, don't worry about it. We'll save that. And another change I like to make is that when I've got my endpoint set correctly, 1000 to 2000, I can change these thresholds. The stick low threshold, I can lower that to something closer to 1000, like 1010. And the stick high threshold, I can move it up to something closer to 2000, like 1990. And that will get rid of just a little bit of deadband at the bottom of the stick travel. We'll save that. Next, we're going to go into the Modes tab and look at the aux modes. And they've set up the aux modes for this, the arming mode, the horizon or angle mode, GPS rescue, and so forth. They've set them up some way that they prefer, but it's not how my switches are set up. For example, I have arming on aux 1. And in fact, Express LRS requires that arming be on aux 1 Flywoo. It requires that arming be on aux 1 high. Flywoo, you are shipping a bind and fly with an Express LRS receiver with arming on aux 2. That's a problem. Not like a life-threatening problem, but it's kind of a big deal. It kind of shows that they didn't really think about the fact that they were putting Express LRS in here. They just left their standard configuration and slapped an Express LRS receiver in it. Oops. All right. Continuing, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the Betaflight presets tab. And if you click preset sources and add new source, you can add this source. JB presets, you can name it whatever you want. But the URL that you see here and the GitHub branch that you see here have to match exactly. And if you hit make active, you will be looking at my Betaflight presets repo. And one of the things I've got here is my aux mode configuration, which I just used to set up every quadcopter, bing, 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 just like normal. Don't worry about that. It'll still work in 4.4.0. I should update that. Having done that, I'll hit save and reboot, and I will go look at the modes tab. And now I have arming on aux 1 as required. And I've got angle mode on this switch and turtle mode on this switch. Beeper, there's one I'm missing, which is GPS rescue. That's not a part of my standard setup because I usually don't have GPS on my quads. But let's go ahead and enable GPS rescue. Hello, where is it? There it is, GPS rescue, add range. And what switch are we going to use for GPS rescue? I guess we'll use this one, aux 5, and we'll have that in the down position. Now we have a way to activate GPS rescue, and that is going to be our aux mode setup. Yikes. Well, the quadcopter is now set up and basically ready to go. All I need to do is put the props on it. If you don't know how to put props on a quadcopter correctly, I'll put a link in the video description to my video about props for noobs, how to put them on right, how to know which one goes where and why. We'll put the props on and we'll take it out and we'll give it a flight. Before I say any more about that, can I take a second to let you know that I have a Patreon. Patreon is a website where you can subscribe to me for as little as $2 a month or more if you feel like I've earned it. The amount you sign up for is totally up to you. You can change it or unsubscribe whenever you want. There's no commitment, but if you do sign up, you do get access to my Discord server. Discord server is full of friendly, helpful people who want to try to solve your problems, chat with you about FPV. Basically a whole bunch of people, kind of weirdos like me, who just really like messing around with quadcopters and helping other people. Who knew? I'm not alone. Mostly though, I hope you sign up for Patreon, not because you want access. I mean, yeah, if you want access to the Discord server, cool, it's great. But mostly I hope you sign up because you feel like you get a lot of value from my content. And this is the video that puts you over the edge where you're like, okay, I've gotten so much out of it, I'm going to sign up. If that day is today for you, then link in the video description where you can sign up. And if not, hey, I get it. Sometimes it takes some time before you are really sure. I'll keep making the videos, you keep watching them, and hopefully that day will come. So the next thing I'm going to do is take this outside and fly it. And in order to show you that, I'm going to put a card on screen to the full review of this quadcopter, where you can find out how it flies and everything else I think about it. I don't even know what's going to be in that video because I haven't made it yet. As well, I'm going to put a link down in the video description if you can't see the card for some reason. I'll see you there.